Great. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate you guys joining us today. We're really excited to have a conversation digging into various elements across the country, but especially focusing on PJM. My name is Ben Walker. I am the Vice President of Market Analytics. I watch market fundamentals, regulatory events, and other pricing trends across the U.S. for both power and natural gas. And I'm joined by Susanne Buckley, who has been at all the big three elements of the industry: the supplier, the utility, and the consultant side. So excited to have Susanne with us today. She is one of the best at keeping her head in the acronym soup of PJM. So thank you, Susanne, for joining us.
Sure. Nothing that I aspired to as a little girl, but I do know every acronym in PJM. So thanks, Ben.
Yeah. Anyway, if you are joining and you see the Q&A or the chat section in your Teams window here, please add things there. We're happy to respond to them. We'll try to do it as they come in live if we can. But I wanted to get us started with a little bit of a conversation around FERC's show cause order. Again, this is one of those esoteric things in the industry, but the whole world right now, or the whole country right now, is asking, how do we add large loads, data centers, to the grid without breaking the bank? And so in June 18th, FERC required the markets to justify or reform their interconnection process. And that response deadline was Monday. And so because we're in this back to school situation, we wanted to just give each region a report card, right? SPP and MISO, they did great. One of them, they kind of both did their homework before asked, but SPP did better. So they tested out of the class. Great job. IS and New England did their homework, right? A gold star, whatever you want to give them. California asked for an extension, so they're catching up. New York, they passed a moratorium on data centers. So they still have to respond to the FERC show cause order, but they really are kind of saying it doesn't matter because they're not going to build any data centers there soon. ERCOT is not subject to FERC jurisdiction, right? So they had, they're not in the class, but they still have to have the data center problem solved. So they tried to do their homework. They did a whole bunch of planning work to do what they call batch zero, which was let's look at all the data centers and see if we can analyze where they could come online. All that planning work happened this summer. August 3rd, they launched. For reference, ERCOT's peak grid demand is 92 gigawatts. They had over 200 gigawatts of large load join that process, looking to connect to the grid. So really big changes. That was August 3rd. August 4th, the governor said, uh-oh, and he put a big pause on it. And there's a stakeholder who grumbled that the governor has injected maximum uncertainty into the process. So we don't really know what's going to come next in Texas. A lot of things have been going on. Right after that, the forecasted load growth for Texas went from 14% year-over-year growth from 26 to 27. It dropped from 14% down to 6%. So we saw a pretty immediate drop in the forecasted load growth for the electricity needs. We're not quite seeing that in pricing yet. We expect it to come out eventually as the pause kind of persists longer. But again, we'll continue to monitor that. And then PJM is bottom of the list. They have done a lot of things to try to respond to this, but they've been pretty ineffective at responding to the data center problem. So I have them as skipping class and now facing mandatory study hall. FERC is wagging their finger and implementing some pretty drastic changes there. I will note that FERC did submit a copy of IS and New England's homework kind of at the last minute. So Susanne, now we're ending on PJM. Yeah. How do you think, is that a fair classification of where PJM landed?
Yes, I think, I think it's fair to kind of set the table of why is PJM in this situation in the first place? And when this whole data center boom started happening, those guys targeted where's fuel, where are power prices cheap, and where are the most power plants. And that immediately targeted ERCOT and PJM. PJM sits on top of the Utica and Marcellus shale plays. We had very cheap power prices. A $20 wholesale power price was not unheard of for a long-term strip price. Now that's a much different scenario. So with that came a lot of complexity, and PJM is a member organization run by generators, transmission owners, like CRES, which we call other suppliers like Direct and Constellation, things like that, and end users. So the structure of PJM, which is a membership organization, it's difficult to pivot very quickly to extreme market changes. You have to get the stakeholders involved. You have to get consensus. Then you have to get approval from FERC. And this change happened so rapidly that I don't think PJM's structure allowed for that type of change that quickly.
I think you're spot on. And I think that's part of when I said the finger wagging earlier, right? Is FERC is really coming down to say, PJM, you need to make some changes so that you can respond faster. And I think as as a consumer on the grid, I think you're a little bit justified in pointing the finger at PJM and saying, look, yeah, it's hard, but you've had a year and a half and you're only just now seeing a backstop auction next year, right? Or next month, excuse me, which is kind of the first effort you had to solve that. Do you want to take a moment and go through some of the other efforts that have been going on in the region?
Sure. So as you mentioned, PJM has done numerous small bites of changes. And if you add them all up, there's like over a dozen initiatives happening right now. Some will have very good impacts potentially for end users, and some are just minor, bureaucratic things that don't really matter. But the big three, I think, as an end user that folks should keep their eyes on and will have an impact on pricing going forward are the three that you have up in your slide. The first one is the Interim Resource Adequacy Service. Now, this has not been approved by FERC. We're in a proposal stage, but this thing is moving very quickly. And this is saying, okay, big, large load, you can interconnect to the grid. We can get you on. However, we don't have enough capacity at this point to serve that large load potentially. And so what you have to absorb is curtailment. So that's the kind of the give and the take. We're going to let you interconnect, but for a period of time until you can bring your own capacity, which means either build your own power plant or do a deal with a new generator, we want flexibility to curtail you. And this curtailment would happen right before an emergency event. So it's a little more burdensome than what a traditional emergency DR program would have. So that's kind of the one initiative. You can come, but we might be curtailing you.
And I think one thing to point out on that is that approach, I think that's the copying New England's homework, right? So New England had a similar approach about a month ago. ERCOT, if you're in Texas, we've seen similar language from them of that question of how do we make data centers or large loads in general turn down their usage when we need them to, right? And setting up the correct regulatory environment, pricing economic signals, the technology in place for that. I think every grid is really grappling with this with different approaches and different potential outcomes. And it really, as an energy buyer, I think you're sitting there looking at your demand response program, right, of how that rule might change, and even potentially how if these data centers do come on with flexibility, they can't raise the ceiling, but they might raise the floor. We might see a lot more demand growth kind of in these nighttime off-peak periods so that we see more and more demand for energy, even as the demand for the grid, right? There's very specific KW versus a KWH. The KW for the grid, the demand isn't going up while the requirements for more electricity are increasing. So there's definitely pricing impacts across the country with this.
Yeah. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see if the data centers have an appetite for this. Their speed to market is the most valuable thing on, frankly, planet Earth right now, is speed to market for large load compute. And will they be able to handle that curtailment option? Time will tell. But the second big reform here is queue reform, Ben, if I could move on.
Please.
Which is so the process for PJM reviewing new generation projects, like I want to build a power plant, I want to connect to your grid, PJM. They go through a long iterative process of how will that power plant affect other load on the grid? Do we need to build transmission lines? What's the feasibility of this plant? That used to take 4 to 6 years just to get those projects out of what we call the queue. That's insane, right? Like financing can't hold their proposal through that process. And what ended up happening is a lot of those projects ended up being more speculative in nature. A lot of renewable projects, which are great, but it takes a lot of effort to look at a small renewable project as a large natural gas project. So PJM reformed the queue, making a kind of a commitment that they will get these projects through the queue between 1 and 2 years. And instead of kind of doing first in, first out, they're going to do first ready, first out. So if you have a project that has the financing, you have the land, you're ready to go, you have the equipment, the orders are there, boom, you just need interconnected, they're going to get through the queue faster. And the results of this latest queue reform saw over 200 gigawatts, as your chart shows here, of new generation seeking to be interconnected. So I go, ooh, 201, okay, gigs, is that enough? Is that good, right? Well, the peak for PJM system is around 165 to 180. Okay, it just depends in the margin of reliability and things like that. So this is like double. But what is reality, right? What's going to come out the backside of this queue is going to be important. And, I ran some stuff on the old computer to see, gosh, if we applied historic success rates of top of the queue, bottom of the queue, and actually energized, it's around 25%. So applying that to this 200, just spitballing, we get in that 80 gigawatt range.
Sure. And I think one of the important contexts there, right? You're saying that the current PJM between 165, 180, PJM thinks they're going to need 70 more gigawatts in the next 10 years. And so if for listeners on the call, right, if Suzanne's saying, if we get 80 out of this and we need 70, we're doing all right. If we get 60 out of this and we need 70, now it's a little bit more of a challenge.
Yes. And this is not like one and done, right? This is a ongoing process. New projects will be coming in, projects will be falling out. But to your point, like we're on that edge of satisfying what we need. Now, the question is when's it coming?
That's exactly what I was going to ask, because which comes first, not the chicken or the egg, but the data center or the generator, right?
Yeah. Well, certainly a data center. I think the time to market, if you had everything available to you, is in the range of 2, maybe 3 years. Time to a power plant, if you get the interconnection, and we're talking natural gas primarily, because that's really what kind of came in this queue, is about 6 to 7 years. And that is because of the complexity of what we're talking about. It's not just the financing. It's, we have to get a natural gas pipeline here. Then we got to get turbines. We got to build it, all the things. So there is going to, even at best, right, we have all things aligned. Everybody's cooking. The bureaucrats are doing the best that they can. We're still going to have a gap. This generation is probably going to be coming online post 2030, primarily. We'll see some stuff coming early, but the bulk of it's going to be coming after 2030. So what do we do, right?
You tell me. I've got an idea.
Okay. Well, that's kind of the third initiative. I think PJM's thing.
So do you want to be here then next?
Sure. So, PJM has these annual auctions. They should occur 3 years in advance of the delivery year. Each of these calendar where you have like 29, 30, those start June and end in May. So each one of these periods start June. So we had these auctions and they were orderly and normal. And as you can see kind of in the middle of that graph, we saw really low capacity prices. That is to indicate, we have enough generation to satisfy load. This building new generation is not very valuable. That's kind of the price signal. All of a sudden, kablam, 25, 26 happen, right? What is going on? Well, a lot of this was driven by, yes, new large loads coming into the forecast, but also we had a delay in the auction due to some gross FERC stuff that we don't even need to get into. But also PJM limited the amount of generation that participate in the auction. So demand went up, supply went down, and here we are sitting at these big spikes in capacity.
And I think to address the kind of hollow bars on top of that, the PJM governors got together and recognized this kind of shortfall, which partially is because data center demand growth exploded kind of unexpectedly, right, as AI arrived on the scene. But part of it was the legacy challenges of being a little bit behind on their auctions. And so the governors recognized that and put on what's called a collar. And so the price had both a ceiling and a floor when they ran this auction. And of course, we hit the ceiling and we hit it 3 years in a row. So that's why we've seen those protective bars. We get one more auction with the ceiling. And then there's a lot unknown coming kind of that 2030, 2031 timeframe.
That is true. There have been no filings to extend that collar, although politically, I think it's a necessity. I don't see how, really Governor Shapiro from Pennsylvania is the one that led the charge on that. I don't see politically how he's not going to allow that to continue to happen, although he just passed a data center rule within his state that is a bit onerous for expanding new data centers. So there's a little bit of a sentiment change on his behalf here too.
Yeah.
So I would expect the collar to be extended.
I think if I were a betting person, I would, it's a little bit better than even odds. But given the backstop auction, which we haven't, maybe we should touch on that next. The backstop auction, for those listening, this auction that you're looking at is kind of what I would call the traditional one. It's let's procure capacity for everybody in PJM. And New England and New York run their own capacity auctions. ERCOT famously doesn't have a capacity auction and lets LMPs and ancillaries go to the moon to provide that economic price signal. But you have these auctions that are supposed to be for everybody. PJM is saying, let's take new data centers out of the auction and they get their own auction run on the side, which is being called the backstop auction. And so we're expecting those results. The auction is going to open in September, and then the results will be available this December. That's really, when I point to the first thing that PJM is doing to kind of structurally solve this, that was what I was meaning. And I think there's a chance, right? There's a chance that you see this backstop auction starting in 2030. Maybe you see the capacity prices come off a bit and you might not see the need for a collar. So that's why I say, slightly above even odds. I think there's a world where the collar is not needed.
I like your optimism.
I am optimistic.
Yeah.
Yep,
go ahead, please.
Well, the one thing that I think this kind of creates an interesting kind of perspective for. So again, sitting in an energy buyer's shoes, I think that the data center growth and the data center general grid growth, right? We've talked about a lot of that's coming from data centers. We've talked about the generation queue of new generators coming online, and we talked about it's a little bit of a race condition, right? Which one wins? Kind of curious, Susanne, my mental framework right now is that because it's going to take a little bit of time, the end of 2026 and even 2027, probably not huge changes, right? There's a lot of huge changes on the regulatory front. But for me as an energy buyer with my energy contract, the world of next year is pretty similar to the world of this year. And I think I can kind of know what I'm supposed to do. Come this 2028 to 2032 timeframe, there's a lot of uncertainty. Nobody really knows how that's going to play out. And then once we get to like 2034, kind of the back half of next decade, all of these problems will hopefully have been solved, right? Yeah. So you kind of have this like almost like a bell curve of like, we got to climb the hill and then we're going to come down from the hill. And so I don't know. Do you agree with that? Are you moving the timelines, or does that sound reasonable to you?
I do agree with that. In as far as how much we know AI is going to, and I don't mean an AI from a consumption standpoint, I mean AI from a solve standpoint. The energy world will be using AI to solve some of these problems and to iterate where today we might be using Monte Carlo methods or things that take a lot more time. So I think arriving at answers is going to be much quicker in future state utilizing AI. But to your point, yeah, we have this gap. And, to the listeners now, I think during this gap, if I were sitting in the buyer's shoes, the first thing I would do is to communicate up the chain what is going on, right? Nobody wants to be the buyer for the company, and then the big hits come and they go, Dave, what happened? And you're like, it's the markets. Well, Dave, you're not managing this properly. You know what I mean? So it's like, you don't want this stuff to be pinned on you. It is the markets. We can't control the markets, but we can communicate what's going on within those so that your leadership can make decisions appropriately. So that's kind of like number one in my book.
And you can't control the market, but you can hedge it, right? I mean, that's the other conversation that I feel like we're having more and more with clients is, and maybe we should get to this next too, of kind of what's happening in the near term. But near term, we're seeing actually a whole bunch of bearish factors stack up, right? You've got El Nino, you've got storage, so we're actually seeing some bearish factors in kind of the next 18 months. And yet you've got kind of this unknown data center regulatory environment. Natural gas near term is down, but a lot of electricity prices are pretty much flat across these kind of two, what feels like an imbalanced situation where you've got this high uncertainty coming with potential for high prices and this kind of low price environment with the bearish indicators stacking up. You can hedge 2, 3, 4, 5 years out depending on what your situation is, and that's becoming more and more attractive to ride out the uncertainty and to try to not get stuck.
Yeah. And I guess it depends on what your baseline is you're comparing it to, right? It seems stable for now. And as we all know, the market's volatile and there will be dips. So I guess phase 2, after communicating to your leadership what's going on, is to really set up a real life risk management plan, depending on your size. And like, this is one of those things that, we only talk to very large customers about, but I think it's appropriate to start talking about this with middle-sized customers because there are dips in the market. Those dips do not last long. So you kind of need to be set up to take advantage of that ahead of time, and getting the plan set going into a certain season or going into a certain calendar year so that nobody's freaking out when the opportunity comes on. It's on, we're here. No, it's all set up so that you're just like, boom, you're in execution mode. And that type of behavior and strategy will translate into lower bills, no doubt.
Yeah. So, Jen, I saw your question in chat. Hopefully we're addressing the pricing premiums. If not, please ask it again or ask in another way. And anybody else, if you've got questions, feel free to add them in there. I'm going to come back to you now, Susanne, and ask, I mentioned these bearish drivers. You mentioned a potential for a dip in the market. Let's put on our optimist hats. If there were to be a dip, right, what do we think is going to cause it? What are these bearish factors that you're seeing in the market right now? Call it the next 18 months.
Yeah. I mean, weather. You mentioned El Nino. Now, it's weird, right? We can get what's happening right now. We have a normal kind of cool off rest of August forecast. So that's just a few weeks here near term, but yet it affects the cow strips going forward. So it's like if we see an early warmer than normal December, that's going to be a buying opportunity for 27, 28. keeping in mind that even though our hats are on of El Nino, it's going to be a warm winter, that does not absolve us of having a berserko 2 or 3 weeks of insane cold and prices, which can just wipe out that whole warmer than normal prices.
Yep.
So if we have a warm December, get ready. I think that's going to be the nice buying opportunity.
A warm forecast, right?
Yeah, a warm forecast.
I mean, the item I've been looking at too is the forecast for natural gas production for 2027. At the start of this year, we were expected to produce about 110 BCF per day, and now we're at 116. Right. So quick math, what, 5.5%, whatever the number is. But that's a pretty significant growth just in natural gas supply available for next year. And if you pair that with the warm weather, the strong storage situation, if nothing changes, we are on track to set a record for storage, like to shatter the existing record next year. My bet is that something will change. You'll actually see potential for price drop. You'll see production shut-ins. I think drillers have gotten better and better at drilling the well, getting it all ready, all the capital costs, all the exploration, all the drilling, all the construction, everything, and then putting a cap on it and saying, we're going to turn it on when prices are better. So I think you'll start to see a little bit production drop a little bit on that. But the fact that we're looking at El Nino coming, we've seen some supply slowdowns from LNG, right, with terminals delayed a month or two or a quarter or two here and there. We had one terminal offline for maintenance for a couple months this summer. I think things are pointing to, kind of these stacking bearish factors, and we've seen natural gas prices soften in the short term on account of that.
Agreed. It's a wild, you're hearing two things all at the same time. Those bearish factors, yet we have chaos. So it's kind of, how does a buyer navigate all of that? And all that we can hope to provide is guidance through that process, navigating these choppy waters and taking advantage of market opportunities when they are there.
Yeah. We're getting close to the end, so thank you everyone for hopping in. And I see that Chin has asked a question in chat here about the how we know demand increase is coming on the. I would assume that we're talking about electricity, but on the demand side, we know that that's coming. What can we do on the supply side to bring new energy? And to that, it's really that I would say every region. We talked a little bit about the PJM queue reform. Across the board. New York is having reserve margin in summer conversations. ERCOT had their reserve margin conversations. They're actually pretty good at getting generation up and going. New England was banking on some offshore wind that the federal government just kind of slowed down for them. So across the region, all the regions, you're seeing more effort from the regulatory bodies to try to clear that up and make it happen fast. We just have supply chain and regulatory issues, but you just can't build something in 3 years. I mean, if you said, here's a shovel, go, you still need some time to get through the legal reviews, the environmental reviews, join the interconnection queue, get the new equipment in. And so there's not much we can do aside from, maximizing the technologies, all technologies, right? And I think that's New York is saying, maybe we should back off our climate targets because we need the power. So you're seeing some really interesting struggles with that.
And then I would just, since I have 1 minute, I would just say one more thing for, again, the end users is now is probably the right time to revisit projects. They're penciling out more now than ever before. Capacity prices are up, energy prices are up. So all of your kind of pro formas that you looked at maybe 2 or 3 years ago, they're going to look better. So any sort of projects to reduce your consumption, I think now's the time to take a look.
And I think that goes to the other question that just came in here about the risk management versus flexibility of demand versus long-term hedges. People have been using long-term hedges forever. It's still a very valuable strategy. The difference that's been coming up is the value of flexibility of demand, of having on-campus generation or on-campus turn the dial down, demand response, has skyrocketed with these new capacity prices. So people are still using both, but man, if you can reduce anything on site, you're in good shape.
Yeah.
Cool. Go ahead. Last word, Susanne. It's up to you.
That's it. That's all I got. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for joining. It was great fun. And yeah, if you have any questions, I'm sure Bridget has a form or Beth has a form that you can fill out.
Yeah. Please reach out if you want to talk about this. We love this day in, day out. We tried to spare you the acronyms today, but thanks for joining.